In a science fair project, Emily conducted an experiment in which she tested professional touch therapists to see if they would sense her energy field. She flipped a coin to select either her right hand or her left hand, and then she asked the therapist to identify the selected hand by placing their hand just under Emily's hand without seeing it and without touching it. Among 325 trials, the touch therapists were correct 149 times. Complete parts A through D. In part A it says, given that Emily used a coin toss to select whether her right hand or her left hand, what proportion of correct responses would be expected if the touch therapist made random guesses? Here it says to type an integer or a decimal and do not round. Well, if she flips a coin, it's either one or the other. So the touch therapist would randomly be choosing one hand out of the two possible hands. And so therefore, that would be 1 out of 2, and we would write that as a decimal of 0.5. So let's go ahead and put that answer in here for part A, 0.5, and there's our answer. Okay, now it says, using Emily's sample results, what is the best point estimate of the therapist's success rate? And it says round to 3 decimal places as needed. Well, let's take a look here. If we want to be able to find, so this is part A. Okay, for part B, okay, we need to know the value of the sample size. Well, the sample size is how many trials there are. So that means that the sample size n is equal to 325. Okay, and then how many successes were there? Well, they were correct 149 times, so x is going to equal 149. So remember that the point estimate is equal to x over n. And so we're going to take 149 and then divide that by 325, and then we're going to round that to 3 decimal places as it's stated here. So let's go ahead and do that. So here we're going to take our amount of 149 and then divide that by 325, and then rounding out to 3 decimal places we get 0.458. So we get 0.458 as our answer. So let's go ahead and do that. 0.458. And there's our result. Okay, now it's telling us that using Emily's sample results, construct a 95% confidence interval estimate of the proportion of correct responses made by touch therapists. So in this case here, we can actually use StatCrunch. So we're going to open up StatCrunch. Okay, and then from here, what we want to do is we're going to go to Stat. Now, because we're dealing with a proportion, we're going to go to Proportion Stats. We're going to go to one sample, but we don't have all of the data. We only have the summary of the data, so we're going to select Summary. So the number of successes were how many times it was correct, which is 149. The number of observations was the total sample size. In this case, it was 325. Okay. Now, in the question, it's saying they want us to then conduct a 95% confidence interval. So we're going to come down here and then select that confidence interval, and you can see it's already in at 0.95, and then we're going to go ahead and compute. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy this data into our notebook. And again, we need to round this to 3 decimal places, and that's what we'll do. Now I want you to notice here that you can see here that this is the point estimate, which is the same thing here as the sample proportion. We have our lower limit, and then we have our upper limit. So therefore, the interval for P is going to be, for the lower limit rounded to 3 decimal places, is 0.404, and the upper limit rounded to 3 decimal places is 0.513. So let's go ahead and put those results, 0.404 and 0.513. Checking our result, and there is our answer. Now in part D it says, what do the results suggest about the ability of touch therapists to select the correct hand by sensing energy fields. And so what we want to do is we want to discuss the confidence interval. So we're not necessarily looking at just the upper confidence limit and the lower confidence limit. Okay, we're looking at the confidence interval. And if you look at the confidence interval, the lower limit is 0.404. Okay, and then it gets to 0.513. So this confidence interval is not entirely above 0.5. So what we would say is the following. We would say that since the confidence interval is not entirely above 0.5, there does not appear to be sufficient evidence that touch therapists can select the correct hand by sensing energy fields. So therefore, we were going to say A is our result, and there's our answer.